Right, I grow a lot of Chamaerops humilis. I've got several palms in the garden. The one we're looking at here is in a pot and absolutely fine throughout the winter, no problems. Let's move over to this one. So we've got another one here. This is more the Etna Star with the white, really white back. Again, in a pot, looking really good. But a Chamaerops humilis cerifera, not looking so good. This is in the ground. So this is where being a pot can help a little bit, because obviously freer draining doesn't hold so much moisture as the ground itself does. So even though stuff in pots is not, or are not as hardy possibly, drainage is better. So yeah, you lose a little bit of hardiness, but you get less build up of moisture, if you like. So yeah, this is the Chamaerops humilis cerifera, which, to be fair, has lost a lot of blue over the winter, just sort of on the tips. But we had the old spear pull, so we can see it's rotted off in the centre, and you can normally tell where you've got the outer leaves, which are really nice and sort of open, when you start seeing, like this one for instance, where it started to close up a bit, and this one was really closing up. So I gave it a gentle pull and it pulled straight out. So we've pulled out about three or four leaves, or 3 leaves, 1 spear. So we've got a big hole in the middle. Not overly concerned. Did put some hydrogen peroxide down, just a little dribble that fizzed straight up. So we've got a bit of a hollow in the middle. The beauty of Chamaerops is a clustering palm, so even if the centre one does die, we've got several around the base. So if the main trunk does rot and die, we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, there's 6 suckers around there, and they're all looking fine, because obviously they've had a little bit more protection from the top leaves. So I won't give up totally on the centre, the main trunk. That may grow back, but if it does die, then we've got all the suckers around it. So the more predominant suckers will take over, and there's one here which is already starting to look quite good, and another one here. So not all is lost. Now this is a palm I've had literally from seedling size. This is like about 5 years old from a strap leaf, and yeah, sort of got a little bit of a trunk on it now. They're slow growing, but nice. But yeah, I've never had an issue with the cerifera. Like I say, it's supposed to be a little bit hardier, but probably less damp tolerant, because it's a sort of mountain form with the standard Chamaerops humilis. We all know, basically European fan palm, they sort of Mediterranean climate, but yeah, this is a mountain form. It obviously wants a more freer draining soil, so not necessarily the coldest. Got this one is definitely the damp levels. Right, so that's the bad news, but let's have a look at some of the other ceriferas. Not ceriferas, I've got one in the front, some of the other standard Chamaerops, and we've also got a volcano and some Etna stars as well. So we're here. So we've got another Etna star, which again is looking fine. Nice white centre spears. The leaves on it, before they sort of open up fully, quite nice white, because you can see the underside. Tops green, bottoms really white, so that is quite a nice form. And to be fair, there's a lot of sort of mixed half and half, where you'll get a lot of straight green Chamaerops humulus, and there's a little bit of white as they come out, and then they sort of turn green after. But let's have a look at this one, which is the volcano. And again, to me, this looks like it's got a bit of sort of Etna star in it, because there's a lot of white on the backs of these, where in general the volcanoes are more sort of totally green. And this one's sort of got quite a look of castor palmate as well, where the sort of leaf dips in the middle a bit. So yeah, it's a bit of an unusual variant, and again, like all palms, you do get a lot of variation in the same species. But to be fair, I think I got lucky with this one. I bought this as a very small plant, and it is a really nice form. Like I say, you can hear how stiff it is. Seems really hardy, even with the really bad Arctic blasts we had. Leaves are looking perfect, nice and white in the centre there as it's coming out. And there's actually 4 spears pushing out of the centre. So we are sort of getting towards the end of February now, and yeah, so we've probably seen the worst of the winter weather. I'm not saying we've seen all of it, but we've seen the worst of it. And to be fair, this is probably my favourite Chamaerops I've got. Some of the very oldest leaves have got a little bit of brown spot on, but like I say, in general, you look at it from above, and that is really looking quite a nice plant. So yeah, I'm pleased with that. I think I only paid £15 for that, and it's a very small plant, and it seemed quite a lot at the time, but in hindsight, very happy with that purchase. Interestingly, this one has no suckers on it, but not to say that won't eventually. But yeah, so that's a nice little variation on your standard Chamaerops humulus. So while we're looking at the Chamaerops humulus in general, we'll have a look at some of the other ones we've got in the garden, to see how they're doing. I have got one underneath the big boutia there, and again, this is what I'm saying about this one, is this pure green. There's no white on the undersides of that whatsoever. But when they first come out, the spears are quite white, but that doesn't necessarily mean it's going to be or not necessarily the variant Etna star, because the Etna star will keep the white, where this one is this pure green underneath. So let's go over to one of my favourite Chamaerops humulus standards, because it's grown in quite a bit of shade. We've got really quite large fronds on this, and like I say, because it's stretched, grown in shade, looks really quite nice. So I think I prefer the look of the Chamaerops in a shade or part shade location, just for the size of the fronds. Looks a bit more tropical. And again, we can see we've got the sort of white when it first comes out, but yeah, afterwards there's a little bit of white on that. That does pretty much fade to green as the leaves mature. Right, so, and then I've got several out the front as well, and we've got basically 5 going along here. So this is a good variation here because we've got a little bit of white on the underside of these. This one a little bit less white. So these were all bought in the same batch. I think I got these from B&M, I don't know, three years ago, all reduced. I think I've got a couple of pots and they all had sort of 3 or 4 plants in them, so I divided them up carefully, and they don't mind being sort of pulled about a little bit because they've taken off quite well. This is a smaller one, and we can see on that there's absolutely no white under that whatsoever. So that is a straight green. Now these ones, there's a little bit of white we can see. Here's a slightly bigger one. Again, very, very little white underneath them. In fact, probably none at all. Just on the odd leaf. But again, sort of a whitish look to the spears as they're opening. And then we have another one here. So again, the reason why I've got so many of these is just the fact that they were cheap and cheerful at the time. And like I say, you can pull them about, you can uproot them, as long as you're careful. Like any palm really, nothing likes or enjoys being pulled about and sort of roots being played with, but some palms do tolerate it more than others, and I found with the Chamaerops, they're quite often sold with multiples in a pot, so you can get away with dividing them carefully, and they seem to tolerate that quite well. Along with, obviously, you've got your Chamaerops fortunei, which will tolerate, if you've got several in a pot, you can divide them up. And again, with the Washingtonia robusta, you can get away with dividing them carefully. I mean, if it's a really, you quite often see Washingtonia robustas sold as sort of doubles, triples, or even quadruples, and you'll always have one really small one which tends to struggle. But if you divide them up, the chances are you'll keep a couple of plants and they'll grow better as a single rather than clustered together, because you always get one that sort of dominates and then the rest will struggle. But anyway, so that's just a quick look at the Chamaerops humilis, and just a reminder that I think if you're going to have trouble with any of them, that'll be the Cerifera, just because that needs more drainage really than any of the others. And even though the specs and on paper it says they're probably a little bit hardier than your standard Chamaerops humilis, the Cerifera doesn't like the damp, so it will struggle. And I've got a feeling this spear, I can't pull it out at the moment, spear, sorry, leaf, but I can see a sort of difference between the other leaves where they're nice and open. This one is closed up, so that's starting to die off, so that will pull out eventually. Like I say, not all lost, we've got plenty of suckers, so if the main trunk does die, the suckers will carry on, and you'll have a cluster of smaller plants until one of the offsets starts to trunk, and that'll be the main growing point then. So not too concerned. It is annoying when you get a spear pull, but what can you do? It's the weather, you can't control that. Right, we'll leave it there. Thanks for watching.